Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for our webinar. My name is Leanna Strasser. I'm the training director here at Emily's List. I'm lucky enough that I get to work with fantastic candidates that we are endorsing and working with, as well as staffers. I joined the team here at Emily's List last year, and before that, I worked for a variety of different progressive organizations and grassroots campaigns, including 2 Emily's List women. In 2012, I worked for Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign, and in 2016, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Rao. I'm the Senior Director of Major Gifts here at Emily's List. I've actually been at Emily's List for almost 3 years now, but I actually got my start here as an intern and working on Emily's List races out in Arizona.
We're here to talk tonight about how to work on a campaign, how to get a full-time paid position. We couldn't be more excited to join you this evening to talk about it. But before we get started, we'd love to learn about who's actually on the webinar tonight. So you'll see on your screen, there'll be a poll that pops up. It'll have a few options of where in the country you're currently dialed in from tonight. So there should be a few options, including the Northeast, the South, the Midwest, the Southwest, and the Northwest. Give it a second for folks to fill that out. And once the first poll is finished, we'll have a second one pop up that will ask, have you ever volunteered on a campaign before? Yes or no. And you don't have to have any previous campaign experience as a volunteer to join tonight's webinar. Hold on, it looks like there's some technical difficulties with the poll popping up.
Are they supposed to see the poll or no?
All right. Great. Well, it seems like we've got a great group of folks joining us tonight, and so let's dive in and get started. Bear with us for one moment as we try to advance the slides here. So I'd like to show you all the agenda that we've got for tonight's webinar and all the topics that we'll be diving into on how to work on a campaign. Bear with us for just one more second. There we go, to the agenda. All right, so right now we're doing welcome and housekeeping announcements. Then we're going to cover why do you want to work on this campaign, finding the right campaign, and then we'll take a formal question and answer break, as well as then move on to what campaigns look like, what can you sort of expect in the different roles in the day-to-day, and then take another question and answer break at the end.
So before we dive in, we've got some new folks joining us tonight who've never really interacted with Emily's List before, so we just want to take a moment and say hello and thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to be doing this with you tonight. But if it's your first time talking with Emily's List, we want to take a moment and talk a little bit about what Emily's List does as an organization. We are the largest resource for women in politics and have been raising money and supporting women running for pro-choice Democratic women running for office up and down the ballot for over 30 years. So just to kind of break it down by the numbers, we helped elect 116 women to the House of Representatives, 23 women to the Senate, 40% of which have been women of color, which we're so excited about and seeing a great growth in women of color running for office this year. 12 governors, over 800 women to state and local office, and since 2016, since election day in 2016, over 34,000 women have approached Emily's List about running for office, either this cycle and cycles to come, and we're so excited about all of them. And to really harness this energy, Emily's List has launched Run to Win, which is an unprecedented effort to get more women to run for office at all levels of the ballot, from state and local to federal to national. And we're really excited about this energy among these women who are interested in running, especially in 2018. And our country really needs more pro-choice Democratic women just like them. And with so many incredible women running, we want to make sure that we're helping them and doing things kind of like this webinar. We tell our candidates that running a campaign takes an entire team and that they're not alone and that they really need to be surrounded by smart, hardworking, driven people. And so thank you to all of you. We are so excited you're here with us tonight. And we are really thrilled to be sharing some thoughts that we have about the best ways to get these women across the finish line on election day.
Yeah, we can't do this without you. So a few norms for tonight's webinar. Thanks again for joining. We're really excited, but invest in this limited time that we have. We're going to take 2 formal question and answer breaks. And I want to say all questions are valid. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Please type them in to the text box in your webinar toolbar. We're going to get to as many of them as we possibly can this evening, and type them in throughout the webinar as they sort of pop into your mind. You don't have to wait until we take the formal question and answer break. So some questions can sort of filter in when we're ready to start taking questions. And with respect to sisterhood, these slides are internal. You've taken time out of your incredibly busy day to get on this webinar. So want this information for you and to help make sure that we help our women get elected. And so with that, I think folks, as really everyone who's sort of starting out job hunting and figuring out, what position is right for me, what sort of role do I want to take, how do I even do this? You should ask yourself, like, why do you want to work on a campaign? We tell candidates to really think about the succinct answer to why do you want to run for office, and you having the succinct answer of why do you want to work on a campaign will make you a stronger sort of applicant in that process. So let's talk about some of those things to think on this front end of as you're beginning this journey. And that's without a doubt how much time and sort of resources. Time is a limited resource on a campaign, so how much do you actually have to give? I am hoping that most of the folks who are on this webinar tonight are looking to join a campaign full-time. That's really what most paid positions on campaigns are. They're full-time. Maybe there's a unique situation where it's part-time, or maybe we've got some folks here who are joining us who want to be interns and get involved that way. That's great. You'll still learn a few tips tonight on some various things like resume and interview, but really for folks who are looking for full-time positions, a campaign is not 24/7, but it almost is. It's not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Those aren't the hours.
Boundaries are and what you can commit to. They sprint and a marathon. And I do think probably that the most important thing is just having a can-do attitude.
Yeah.
We have to be flexible when we're on campaigns. Sometimes we do things that aren't necessarily directly in our purview, but they are related to the campaign and the campaign success. And everyone on board really just needs to make sure they're doing everything they can to really get that victory on election day.
Yeah, and during the interview, you'll definitely be asked, can you commit to full time? And if you say yes and you get offered the job, the campaign's going to be relying on you. So being honest with how much time you can actually give will help you be successful. Of course, though, as you're thinking through different roles, different opportunities, play to your strengths. If you're a people person and you're applying for an organizer position, which is great, you'll get to talk with voters, you'll help recruit volunteers. So, that sounds like it would really play to someone's strengths. If they're a real people person, they are energetic and sort of positive, outgoing. But there will be times that, you've got to be flexible. And, as Maya said, we all fill different roles on times on a campaign. Some kind of event will pop up that it's all hands on deck, or, strategy will shift and roles will need to be redefined. So really having that can-do attitude, being flexible, is going to be really, really important. I will caution that most people who get hired on a campaign for their first campaign that they're working on usually start sort of entry level. So want to sort of set that expectation. Maybe right now you're a lawyer and you would love to be the voter protection director. That does sound like you could be a good fit. But if the campaign already has a voter protection director but needs more of an entry-level person, because that's who they're still hiring for, being flexible with that, titles, their titles. It's about, participating and helping get the folks across the finish line. And, whatever sort of role you end up with, being flexible, and not just flexible once you're on the campaign, but also being flexible in this hiring process. Campaigns definitely take different times to staff up and ramp up. Some folks, they hire a few people to get through a primary, and then they really hire after a primary. Other folks, they sort of reserve different positions until a specific moment in the campaign. And so it just kind of depends. For me in 2016, I knew that I really wanted to be in a training director role. That was sort of the path that I wanted to go down after working on the organizing side. And I had to wait a couple months until training directors and training folks were being hired, because it just wasn't like a first position that they were hiring for. So, be flexible, but play to your strengths, sort of know, what are you good at? What are you comfortable doing? Those sorts of things as you're searching in the beginning stages of working on a campaign. And it's the perfect time right now to take a step back and really ask yourself, why do you want to do this? Is there a specific candidate you're really excited about? Maybe there's an issue. There are lots of issues right now that might be getting you fired up and excited. Maybe you're living in a state that there's just so much going on, and so that location, really is near and dear to your heart, and so you want to get involved that way. It could also be, as sort of on the bubbles here point out, maybe you want to take a career move and go down this path. Or honestly, it could be you're just looking at the state of our democracy right now, and you can't sit on the sidelines and want to get involved working as a campaign staffer, which for all of those reasons, they're all great reasons. And thank you for joining this webinar, for sort of raising your hand and wanting to learn more about getting involved and supporting these campaigns. We need amazing, energetic people who want to help these campaigns succeed. And here at Emily's List, as we sort of see all these incredible women running for office right now, we want to make sure they've got the help that they need, including staffers like you. So thank you. When I really think about what made me want to get involved in campaigns, I actually first started more being interested in the official side. I think people think about policy and getting bills passed, and I was definitely one of those people. That was where my interest in politics kind of started. And then once I saw there wasn't enough of the right folks at the decision-making table. It was, oh, well, got to volunteer on campaigns, have to start interning and doing the work that I could to get those folks elected. And during that process, I really enjoyed working on campaigns and fell in love with the team that I was on. You really build a deep bond with those people. So for me, it was, thinking about those issues and then sort of jumping right in and really enjoying it once I started it. What about you, Maya? What sort of sparked that kind of interest?
I would probably say it was the 2006 election cycle.
Okay.
When, we were about to have Bush out of office and the Democrats were really mobilizing together. And I believe we took back the House in 2006. And I realized that, I didn't want to sit on the sidelines anymore. I was at a nonprofit in 2006. And I thought 2008, I'd love to be on a House race, or I'd love to just be involved with some kind of House campaign. And that's really when I made my move. And I packed up my bags and I moved to a state I'd never been to before to do something I didn't really know how to do. And that's kind of the nature of campaigns.
Yes.
You hit the ground running and you learn by doing. And it has been an amazing thing. It has obviously shaped where I am today. And I'm so thrilled that I actually had that experience to do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, after you sort of think about this sort of reflection of why you want to get involved, then it's really about diving in and finding the right campaign to get involved with.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about finding the right campaign and where to start. So oftentimes campaign staffers ask, I don't even know how to get a job on a campaign. This feels very foreign to me. And what's the first step? So some campaign websites have a tag right when you sign into the site, join the team or something along those lines. And for some campaigns, those are combinations of both actual paid jobs and volunteer opportunities. Not all campaigns are always in hiring mode. It really depends on what point in the cycle they're in. But they generally are always looking for people to volunteer and come in and help make phone calls or do data entry or knock doors, anything like that. So in that case, volunteering and getting to know the staff would be incredibly helpful so that when a paid opportunity actually does come up, the campaign staff immediately thinks about the people who've already proven that they're loyal to the candidate and the campaign, and that the campaign trusts their work, and that they've shown that they're hardworking and have a good attitude. So that's definitely one place to start. And you can see kind of a sample of Stacey Abrams' site where she's getting people to join the team. So party websites. In some states, there are campaigns that get staffed up by the state Democratic Party, and that usually happens more frequently in big election years like presidentials or midterms. And it's rare that in a smaller race scenario that would happen, but special elections, absolutely. Anything really goes with those, as I'm sure all of you have seen so far this cycle. So sometimes they collect resumes and they send them on to campaigns. So it's a great idea to just at least reach out to your state Democratic Party, ask if they'll take your resume, and shop it around to campaigns that are starting to come up or are already in full swing. In some cases, keeping updated with the local news actually ends up being really helpful, especially at this point in the cycle where there's a lot of campaigns that are starting to open up their campaign headquarters, and maybe they have a couple in their district or they have one in a main city. That's prime job hunting opportunity right there. Visiting a campaign headquarters during their opening and handing off your resume would be a great idea, not only to get your resume handed off, but to also network with other like-minded people there. And then there's just the simple reality of campaigns that so much happens by word of mouth. A job description gets created and then shared with alumni networks, and then alumni networks and former campaign staffers are sending it out to their list. A great place, if you know of folks like this to start at, is former campaign staffers or current campaign staffers. I know that I'm on a million listservs about people who are looking for finance directors or a field organizer or somebody who will just be an office manager and make sure all the trains run on time. So if you know of any former campaign staffers, that's actually a great place to start and really do your networking from there. Oh, and of course, I would be remiss if I didn't plug the Emily's List Job Bank, which is a great resource. And Emily's List has been doing this for a long time and has really helped connect people with the right campaigns and the right races around the country. So now what? Oftentimes campaigns are going to look to their super volunteers and their interns to really hire them on as paid staff, as I said before, mostly because they've proven capable and they've proven really to be committed and passionate about the candidate. So if you're interested in an opportunity or an opening on a campaign, I would recommend that you talk with the appropriate campaign staffer in a professional and in a way that really shows off your best assets. It's not a great idea always to be super aggressive about it when there's a lot going on. If you can pull them aside in your own time and talk with them about why you think you would be qualified for that role, or ask them any questions you might have, that would be smart.
Yeah. And, I've definitely worked on campaigns where we have hired, interns or fellows who just were rock stars. And once there became a paid position that was available, those were the first people. They were like top of mind.
Yeah.
We already knew who they were. They sort of had the skills already that we could, could get them to join the team. And even folks, who we had some, definitely in 2016, we had some fellows who we convinced them to not go back to school that fall semester because, there became an open position and they just were so great. And we were like, take the semester off. And
it happens more often than people would think.
Yeah, definitely. But it was sort of being able to see that person and say, hey, you're doing a great job. And they sort of, as it says here, like they were flexible. They said yes when we sort of asked and asked them to take a leap, because oftentimes that's what this is just jumping.
Yeah. Many people don't realize that this is the career path that they end up on, and they would never imagine kind of doing these types of roles, but because they don't know that they're out there, and they actually are out there and they exist, and they're great career paths.
Yeah, definitely. So as you're sort of thinking through, which campaign you're getting involved, really think about what are some of the skills that you can sort of bring to the table, that you have. You have plenty of experiences that can definitely be shared with the campaign. And it's just thinking about how you can either translate those skills or how to present, in a webinar or in a resume or during an interview, how to translate those skills. And we'll talk about some of the resume and the interview portion, but, think to yourself, do you have digital, website, social media, email writing experience? That could be a really great fit if they're hiring for a digital person. And, depending on the size of the campaign, they may hire one, they may hire multiple, just sort of depends. Here also listed time management, organization. As Maya mentioned, there could be an office manager, there could be a scheduler. Sometimes there's just general kind of assistant or campaign aide who fills lots of holes and does the driving and the scheduling and everything else. So, are those some of the skills you bring? Those could also be translated. I've definitely talked with a lot of folks who have those really strong organizational and time management skills who actually went down the fundraising path because, it takes being organized, keeping everything running, and, it made a lot of sense for them to sort of make that switch. Here we also talk about communications, and maybe you've got some experience coaching, public speaking, or you've worked with the press, any kind of earned media, helping draft press releases, being able to help the campaign with talking points, or honestly be a second pair of eyes on communication that's going out. I know comms assistants who, they're pulling clips all day and things like that. But, also, I think a lot of people bring to campaigns customer service experience, or really experience working with humans, because that can translate into a ton of different roles on a campaign, especially field or the organizing team, depending on which the campaign's calling it, field or organizing. They sort of seem to be interchangeable these days. But, if you love working with people, you love talking with folks, you're going to be great with the clipboard out there, recruiting people to come sign up. That's a great skill set. Or, you'd be a good person in the office to greet the volunteers, to train them, help them, feel confident about the phone calls that they're making, things like that. So I think customer service experiences or camp counselor or any of those things.
Retail or anything.
Yeah.
Yep. Always really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, we're ready for our first question and answer break. Hopefully you've been typing questions into the chat box as we've been going along here. But with that, what questions do we have tonight?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruby, and I am the National Outreach and Training Coordinator here at Emily's List. And I'm going to be reading 5 of your questions for Leanna and Maya to answer. So first up, how can I stand out as a strong applicant without any previous campaign experience?
Want to take that one?
Sure. So I would say, at least when I've looked to hire folks on campaigns in the past, I'm looking for some of those translatable skills, as I was talking about. If you need to restructure your resume, think about how you can talk about those other experiences that you've had into, working with people. If you have been involved in politics in any way, shape, or form, think about how you can talk about those things so that, I, as the campaign person hiring, can sort of think in my head, oh, this, even if you don't have the direct previous experience, I can sort of say, oh, you'd be able to fit nicely into finance or into comms or organizing. And then once you do have an interview or you do have a chance to actually talk with a real live human who works on the campaign, I think showing your passion and like that dedication, for me, that's definitely been, people who've kind of like wowed me with like how much they're like, I'm willing to move tomorrow and drop everything, and I'm so excited about this. Like, those people stand out to me. Like, I remember those people.
Yeah, I would agree. And just going back to what Leanna was saying, you might not have direct campaign experience, but things like working in retail, working in anything that has to do with customer service, those skills really do translate. So really promoting those skills and putting them at the forefront will be helpful.
Yeah.
Nice. Our next question is, I have been trying to reach out to my local candidate and they haven't gotten back to me about working on the campaign. What do I do now?
Yeah, that is a hard one, and I can't say that would be the first time I've heard something like that. A lot of campaigns are just in their initial stages of staffing up, and so there may not be a staff, quite honestly. It might just be the candidate trying to piece everything together. So be patient. They will start kind of putting the pieces together, but in the meantime, as I was saying before, it would be a great time to probably reach out to the state Democratic Party. Maybe they know people on that campaign and can help you get routed to the right person. Or if that campaign's not in hiring mode or they're just not ready yet, they can maybe find some similar campaigns that you might be interested in working on.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen, there might be the one lonely human who's working on the campaign at that moment who's very overwhelmed,
Yep.
has a lot going on, and you coming physically, whether it's to the office or to an event that's happening, and just like honestly, like, hey, I sent in my stuff, not sure, and there can be things that they're like, oh, I never got that, and they can give you their direct email for you to follow up with, things like that. It takes some persistence.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We have 3 more questions. What is the difference between working on a statewide campaign compared to a national campaign?
Oh,
You want to start with federal?
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about this actually in some of the future slides about what typical statewide or typical state and local races the staffing looks like. I would say for a statewide, you're going to have pretty much a little bit of everything. You're going to have your communications shop, you'll have your finance shop, you'll have your field shop, you'll have a campaign manager, and you work really closely on a statewide generally with the state Democratic Party. I think that's the statewide sometimes are similar to how a national operation would run. I'll let you speak a little bit more about the national piece.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how big are these statewide campaigns. Some national races hire thousands of humans. They'll have national headquarters, and then in the battleground states, that's where they have tons of people working for the campaign. So, I'd say it's really scale, and that's also when you think about it in the sense of how many voters do they have to reach out to? You need sort of certain number of staff based on how many voters. So it's a much smaller state and local race. They don't need as many staffers to talk to because it's a smaller amount of voters. So
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have two more. Any thoughts on how to transition from a full-time job to entry-level campaign role, specifically financially?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
That is tough. And I think a conversation about and thinking about your honest state of finances is incredibly imperative when making this either a transition or starting out in a campaign job. Separate from the financial piece, just talking about kind of how you time-wise you transition from a full-time job into a campaign job, I would definitely start by volunteering. If there's certain nights of the week that you could go in and make some phone calls or stuff envelopes or really help out with anything they need, I think that would be incredibly helpful. And maybe some time on the weekends as well to figure out to really make sure that that's what you want to do before making that big financial leap.
Yeah. And there are sort of different things that come along. Usually, campaign staff aren't paid as well as probably what your full-time job is that you're working in right now, but they do offer some other kinds of benefits. You still should be able to probably get health care unless it's like a really, really short term. I've seen campaigns hire like a month before election day, and at that point, it's a month before. But they'll offer in a lot of cases for supporter housing so that you're not paying rent during that experience. Definitely some campaigns, it's they give gas cards to folks who are working out in the field and driving a lot. So and I will say you eat a lot of food that comes into the campaign office.
I know
So,
it's be healthy.
yes,
But
yeah. But so you might not be spending that much money outside of working, but really thinking about, can you maybe take a pay cut for the few months that you're doing it, and are there ways to make that work? And at the end of it, the campaign has an end date, win or lose. So also really thinking about, do you have the time later on if it's going to take you time to find another job? Because it's pretty rare to have something just instantly lined up. You'll also be very tired.
yeah, I was going to say that too. You'll need a little bit of a break for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on our last question. For a bigger campaign like House or Senate, is there a time frame where they generally are hiring for lots of positions?
Want to take that?
Well, I would say generally after a primary or maybe like right before a primary, I've definitely seen some big campaigns hire what some folks will call like DFOs. They're deputy field organizers. They come in sort of in the final weeks, and they really sort of help push folks across the finish line. So I've seen that in primaries. I've also seen that in general elections on sort of big campaigns. But you were the first person hired on a congressional race.
And I come from obviously the financial, the fundraising perspective of this. The first thing any campaign needs is money.
Yeah.
So more often than not, the finance team is the first one on the race to work with the candidate to raise as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, to hire the rest of the staff and open that campaign office. So you will oftentimes find that fundraising staff is hired in the off year, so meaning the non-election year, to really lay that groundwork and raise as much money as is needed. So I would say that kind of they could always be in some sort of hiring mode, but it just depends on what positions they're hiring for.
Yeah, because the other sort of positions, maybe they're hiring them, closer to the primary or right after a primary, once they've sort of secured the nomination as the Democratic Party nominee. But they also, I think, will, besides sort of DFOs, they'll probably have their team set a couple months before the general election. So depending on how spaced out your primary and general are, because I know across the country it's totally different.
Yeah, they really vary.
Yeah.
Great, so that's it for this round of questions. I'll see you on the next round.
Great, thank you. All right, so moving on. So what do campaigns really look like as far as staffing goes? The size of the campaign obviously will affect your job opportunities and the possibilities. So city council races are going to be different than your mayoral races, then will be different than a statewide race, a lot of which we've talked about through your great questions. So a large city might require not only field organizers and a campaign manager, but deputy field organizers and a large comms team, depending on how many people it is and really what the district or the city or the community looks like. So as I mentioned before, this isn't 100% perfect or accurate, but this slide does give you a sense of a typical Senate race and the various roles that they might be hiring for. Not every single campaign has these roles, and some of these roles might be combined. There might be one person doing a couple of these things. And there's also going to be some campaigns where the coordinated campaign, which is kind of, the state party, they will join forces directly with the campaign to really cover some of these staffing needs. And on the flip side, this slide shows what a smaller race might look like. The key difference here, obviously, is that the budget's going to be a lot less, so the staffing needs will be a lot less. And you can see on this slide that sometimes the finance director is the campaign manager, and sometimes the field director is the volunteer coordinator as well. The one thing we always like to make clear, though, is that the candidate has one job, and that is to be the candidate. The candidate doesn't serve multiple roles and multiple jobs. You want to keep your candidate focused on winning and running every single day.
Yeah.
So not every role is really built the same, and some campaigns rely heavily on field organizers to recruit their volunteers and knock doors and staff the candidate. But make sure you're applying for the job that really plays to your strengths. We talked a lot about really thinking about that first before you go in to apply, and think about what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, because whatever it is, you'll be doing a lot of it. And as our president here at Emily's List, Stephanie Shriak, says, even if your title is one thing, the best way to move up is to say yes to everything and helping out and being a team player. And on campaigns, there's never enough time or money. So people are really the key to success. And I couldn't agree with that more. So a finance assistant should expect to be working on call sheets and briefing documents and donor research, really the things that keep the finance department running.
Yeah. And a scheduler, of course, making sure that the candidate's schedule is all up to date, sometimes giving them briefing memos as well, depending on other roles on the campaign that might sit with the scheduler or sit with someone else. Oftentimes you're actually staffing them if the campaign manager isn't actually staffing them, driving them to places as well. So scheduler definitely sort of keeps the train moving.
The researchers and the folks on the research team really do provide a lot of assistance when it comes to not only self-research on the candidate, but opposition research, and really what each side is kind of working on and what each side has available to use.
Yeah, and a front desk assistant or maybe an office manager, they're keeping the office clean, keeping everything in the right places, probably helping some of the field staff or maybe the campaign manager, depending on how big the race is. But they're definitely greeting volunteers as they come in. They might even be training the volunteers for how to make phone calls, how to knock on doors. Kind of depends on the size of the race and all the sort of needs that the front desk person needs to kind of fill.
And then a comms assistant, actually, as Leanna was saying before, a comms assistant is not only helping the communications director, but they're probably doing daily clips, meaning they're looking for articles and any news piece that has to do with the district or the campaign or the candidate or the opponent. So doing a lot of that, helping set up interviews, helping write briefing documents, anything that would really help keep the comms team running.
Yeah. And then this last one, a field organizer or a volunteer coordinator, this is the person who's really working with volunteers, because even if you've got a big staff, you still need thousands, tens of thousands, depending on how big your race is. You need so many volunteers to help you contact those voters. So, recruiting volunteers, making sure that they keep coming back, retaining them. And, oftentimes the field organizers and volunteer coordinators are actually doing that voter contact and talking with voters, helping register people to vote, calling, knocking on doors, and all of these jobs, they are not 9 to 5. I wouldn't even say that they have like really set schedule. I mean, maybe they have a general kind of like daily, in the morning I do this, or, field organizers definitely like, in the evenings, like they're making their phone calls because that's when people are home answering the phone. So these folks, I think, have kind of typical schedules that they sort of know, but every day is totally different.
Yeah.
And you've just got to roll with the punches, with things coming up. And really being flexible, as we've sort of been saying, to just help with whatever is needed and necessary. But no, it's not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
And hopefully, as we've gone through these, you've found something that might pique your interest and that you want to learn more about. All of these are really different types of positions. And I think when I talk to most people, there's something that's interesting in each one of these roles. And so hopefully there is something in there that you're interested in doing, and we're always happy to answer more questions about any of these roles if you'd like to know more. So now just thinking about the first step really, which is your resume, and I'm sure a lot of you have a really great working resume that you already use and is in really great shape and ready to go to a campaign or whatever job you're applying to. Just to kind of back up and let you know a few things from our perspective as we've hired campaign staff before, what we look for. Number one, I always look for a one-page PDF, no more, no less. One page really does help get everything that needs to be conveyed across. And really highlighting those skills we talked about.
Yeah.
Even though it might not be directly related to working on campaigns, highlighting those customer service experiences or ways you've worked with other people, or things that just show that you're a really motivated, driven, hardworking person.
Yeah.
I know I've written a lot of resumes and hired a lot of people, and those are really the things that I key in on.
Yeah. I definitely look at and I tell people also once they leave a campaign to quantify things on your resume. If you say you've previously worked with volunteers, I want to know how many volunteers. Are you talking 3 volunteers? Are you talking 50? That's really helpful. Being able to see, and are things daily? Are they weekly? Like having an understanding, reading someone else's resume on like how to quantify things, because especially if we're really scaling up, that's really helpful information. And otherwise I'm going to ask about it during the interview. Another thing I would say is addresses. So, when I was hiring in 2016, I was definitely talking with folks who were from across the country. They wanted to move to a battleground state and like were ready to go the next day kind of thing. So addresses, depending on if you're applying for, I think, a campaign that's in your state or even in your district, definitely put your local address so that they know that like you're there. You can basically start tomorrow is kind of what they're looking for. Because, at a national level, it's, well, where are you located right now? How quickly can you get to the other side of the country? Because I'm probably going to call the people who are literally actually geographically closer to me first to see, how soon can people start? Because usually campaigns are hiring really quickly. They want to scale up as fast as they can. And then to this last one, tailor, as we sort of talked about, you can take your previous experiences and really, tell a different story that sort of makes sense for this job that you're applying for on the campaign. Even if you don't have campaign experience, think about the position description that you're reading, or, what you've heard about, that role actually doing. Figure out how you can take what you've got and sort of tell that person why you're right for that role. And so during I think every interview, or honestly, I've even done this with volunteers. As an organizer, you sit down with volunteers and talk about like, why are you volunteering? What brought you in? And you're telling this personal story, whether you're coming in as a volunteer or it's during a formal job interview where we all get asked the "so tell me about yourself" question, and that's really what this is sort of getting to. We sort of think about, I think, in organizing and in campaigns, we advise our candidates on using these same steps to telling their own personal story. And it's really, thinking about a situation, reaction, resolve, and then connecting it all at the end. So, let's say you're applying to be a field organizer for Stacey Abrams. She's running to be the first African-American female governor of Georgia. She's one of our Emily's List women.
Hey, Stacey.
Yeah, we love her. And, if you're sort of answering that question of like, tell me about yourself, talk about a situation, maybe it's the last election, maybe it's when you were younger and, you experienced something, and this could be from healthcare experiences to education, financial struggles, all sorts of things, and kind of like paint that picture that the other person can kind of understand, like basically like why you want to get involved, like what sort of like was that aha moment that like, nope, I couldn't sit back, I couldn't stay on the sidelines anymore, and walk them through these steps of like talking about your human reaction. People want to make sure that if you got upset, you got upset, and talk about these things, and sort of succinctly tell the story of this happened, but maybe you were empowered or you were angry or whatever, but you still took action. You're resolved. You got involved. You maybe are looking to join the campaign, and that's why you want to sort of tie it all in at the end. And that's why I want to be part of this specific campaign, because if the situation you highlighted in the beginning was about healthcare, and then in the end you talk about I want to make sure that Stacey Abrams is fighting for all Georgians to have access to healthcare, you can sort of tie it in at the end, maybe add some local perspective if like it's the town you grew up in, things like that. Mm-hmm. So we sort of try to think of it in this kind of scenario of quickly answering who you are and like why you want to do that job.
Definitely. So as we mentioned, and Lana definitely covered, folks will get asked in the interview by the interviewer to tell them a lot about themselves. And so make sure that you're telling them a bit about you, tell your personal story. Again, to recap, you want to really explain your strongest skills. So whether it's you love talking with people and you're passionate about the candidate and you want to express that passion to other people, or maybe you think of yourself as a total data whiz and you can sit in front of a computer and import data and really work on the computer side of things. That's a great skill to have and a very needed skill. Convey your knowledge of the candidate, the campaign, the district, and the state. That I would say is probably the most important thing. Campaign staff and hiring managers on campaigns, they want you to want to be there. That is what really drives us through some of those really long days and nights and weekends, is the desire and the passion, the commitment to get these people elected. And again, just please be aware of the commitment if you're hired. Be upfront about what you're able to commit to, and definitely hear them out on what they're looking for, and hopefully those two things will match up.
Yeah. Great. So our next round of questions as we close this out.
Hi, everybody. It's me again. So we have time for 3 questions for our last question cycle. Number 1, do you have any advice for a soon-to-be college graduate who would be willing to relocate for a paid position in a competitive election?
That's what we're always looking for. And first of all, let me say how excited we are that you are considering doing a race, graduating from college. It's a great first job to have, really hitting the ground running. I would say for you, definitely check out the Emily's List Job Bank and join that listserv so that you are aware of campaigns all around the country that you could be interested in. As I mentioned before, I hopped on a plane to a state across the country that I'd never been to before for my first race and had an amazing experience there. So definitely checking out the Emily's List Job Bank and submitting your resume there so that it gets circulated around to races all around the country. If there's a specific state that you're interested in, definitely go to that state Democratic Party site. See if you can shop your resume through there. And if you have, at your own university or college, there could be a, Democratic club that would know of some really good connections around the country, whether that's a specific place you're interested in or really anywhere. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
And I think alumni, if there's,
sure.
any alumni who've worked on campaigns or can help you get connected to campaigns in that way, definitely tap all those resources.
But that's great news. We are looking for really excited people who are willing to work hard. We have so many great races around the country right now.
Nice. All right, our next question. It seems like campaigns hire primarily young people. Are there staff opportunities for older people who would bring a lot of professional experience to the table?
Yeah, I had some amazing organizers in 2016 who they knew that community. They had lived there for decades, and they were rock stars at that job because they knew the people who they could recruit to volunteer. They knew the places to go. That was all that we were hiring for at that moment was organizers. And so they brought that can-do attitude, but they totally hit the ball out of the park or whatever kind of sports metaphor you want to come up with. So I think it's not about age. It's just about kind of finding the right position that makes sense, and figuring out you bring that energy and that can-do attitude. Age is just a number.
And the reason that sometimes campaigns are staffed up with young people is because it's easier for young people to move around the country and just pack up a suitcase and jump in their car and be someplace the next day. Whereas it can be harder as you get older when you have, families or you have a mortgage on a house or you have reasons to stay where you are. But please don't let age deter you from it. There's plenty of opportunity for everyone.
Yeah.
Great. And our last question, I'm still deciding what department I am most interested in working with. Could you describe a typical day in your life when you worked on your most recent campaign?
You want to go first?
Okay. So in 2016, I worked in sort of the state headquarters, which, we would be in contact with both national headquarters and the regional local field offices that we were working with. So it was kind of like a unique place, a lot of the leadership team there. So, I had morning meetings that I was sitting in on, and then throughout the day, really checking in both with, my counterparts and the people I was reporting to up nationally, and also checking in and talking with the folks on the ground who, even if they were a few miles away from me, in a field office. And then a lot of the sort of night, I was at the office most nights until 8, 9 p.m. The whole campaign really, I'd say, because I was always sort of preparing for me. I was preparing for the next training, or I was working with the team that was really talking with voters and recruiting volunteers, and making sure that they had everything they needed. Whether I was working on a phone script for a volunteer to call, or making sure that we put together the right sort of training slide deck that we could show organizers on how to do voter registration. So for me, I sat in the office except for when I was really working with the field team, and I knocked a lot of doors being in the battleground state, and made a lot of volunteer recruitment phone calls, which I hope there are some people on this call tonight who I called in 2016.
For the fundraising side, I think a typical day would include prepping call sheets if your candidate is doing call time, which essentially is dialing for dollars and raising money in a not super glamorous way, but definitely a very efficient and effective way. So prepping call sheets for the candidate's call time, which is pretty time intensive, and then mixed in there, really getting event hosts together for fundraisers and checking in with current event hosts to make sure that their events are coming along, that they felt confident about hitting their goals. And maybe writing a direct mail piece or an email or something like that. And then, of course, there's staffing the candidate in call time and really working with them. I'd say a lot of my evenings were spent at fundraising events, really getting there early, making sure the event was set up, running the event, ensuring that everything went smoothly, and then closing out the event. And that was a lot of nights. And you always got a free meal in there somewhere at one of these events. But just, I think one thing that I think we've touched on quite a bit tonight is that, even though I was a fundraiser from start to finish, those last few weeks I was doing a lot of GOTV. I was knocking on a lot of doors. I was making a lot of phone calls, helping out the field team. And the field team always helped me when I needed help at events. So even if you're kind of in one track doing one job, there's plenty of opportunities to help out other teams and do something a little bit different than your normal day-to-day.
Yeah, definitely. There's no normal day-to-day.
That's the normal.
Great. Well, that's it for the questions. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
Great. So just a few things.
So just some key takeaways from tonight. Make sure you demonstrate your time commitment as a volunteer. No job is too small and help is always needed. And that skills are transferable. So again, you may not have what you think is a typical campaign background, but the skills that you do have are important, and I promise you they're relevant in some way. You just have to figure out the way that they are relevant. And then I would say most importantly, explain why you want to work on a campaign. That's hands down the most important piece of it, because your passion is what's going to get you and the campaign across the finish line.
Yeah. So make sure to check out our Emily's List job bank tonight, tomorrow, if you want to sort of work on updating your resume before you upload it. But our job bank, you have to create an account. It kind of walks you through intuitively through the process of setting it up. You'll upload your resume into the bank. You'll be asked to check off 3 different campaign departments you're interested in working in, such as communications, fundraising, field, etc. And then it'll ask you some questions about, where do you currently live? Are you willing to relocate? All of those kinds of things. When are you able to start? So definitely check out our job bank. Would love to get folks connected to some awesome campaigns, and also sign up for our email list, which is weekly, just compiled list of all the different campaigns that we know of hiring, and it'll have the job description, a way to apply. It outlines that really nicely and makes it sort of easy.
And just before we wrap up, I just want to make sure we thank all of our great partners: AFT, AFSCME, ActBlue, UFCW, NEA have been great partners with Emily's List, and so we just want to say thank them. We want to thank them for their support.
For joining us tonight. Hope you found this helpful.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great night. We hope to see you on the campaign trail.